Brothers, this will be a difficult discussion. Not because the principles are complicated, but because money provokes emotion. It exposes insecurity. It reveals immaturity. It touches pride. It challenges habits. If you will allow me, I can help you rightly align your thinking. That is the purpose of this conversation. This is not financial advice in the modern sense. It is certainly not ideology. It is not political commentary. It is not a manifesto against wealth, nor a sermon in favor of it. It is an attempt to clarify relationship. Most of you are working harder than your fathers did. Some of you are working twice the hours, if you are fortunate enough to have a stable job at all. Wages do not stretch the way they once did. Housing feels unreachable. Inflation erodes effort. It is frustrating. I know that. You did not design the system you inherited. You did not choose its incentives, and in many ways, it is structured in a way that does not naturally favor long-term formation and creation. I know that too. The discussion about how to fix a broken system, though related, is separate from this discussion about how to act within it. Those are not the same conversation. Systemic reform requires collective action, long timelines, and structural change. Personal responsibility requires clarity today. Frustration does not absolve responsibility. And something my mother told me along the way. Shoulda, woulda, coulda doesn't put food on the table. I like to remind myself of this when I get angry and frustrated at a system that I don't control. Whether the system is inefficient, distorted, or even unfair does not change the fact that you must operate within it. You must think clearly. You must build anyway. This discussion is equally valuable for young men and for fathers who intend to speak with their sons about money in a disciplined way. Most of us were never taught how to think clearly about wealth. We were either told to chase it or to distrust it. Rarely were we taught to understand it. Make no mistake, there is no ideology here. There is only responsibility. If you feel an emotional impulse to argue or react defensively, pause. The content is not attacking you. Money magnifies character. It does not create it. This conversation will ask you to examine posture, discipline, honor, and accountability. That can be uncomfortable, and that is acceptable. Our goal today is alignment. Now, let's begin. Wealth is not optional for sovereign men. That statement alone will make some uncomfortable. In modern culture, money is either idolized or morally distrusted. It is glamorized in one breath and condemned in the next. Rarely is it discussed with maturity. But a man who seeks sovereignty, stability of mind, stability of family, stability of decision, agency, cannot treat wealth as incidental. A tribe without stored surplus collapses under stress. A household without margin lives reactively. A man without reserves negotiates from weakness and scarcity. And this is precisely why clear financial thinking is rarely taught in a straightforward way. Instead, the subject is often buried under layers of needless complexity. Mathematical anomalies presented as scientific formulas, jargon passed off as sophistication, statistics weaponized to intimidate rather than clarify. The average man is made to feel that unless he understands advanced instruments, macroeconomic theory, or financial engineering, he has no business building wealth at all. That is a lie. Much of the complexity that surrounds finance does not exist to empower you. It creates dependency. It's designed to obscure institutional corruption and to gatekeep. When a system feels too complicated to understand, people default to trusting intermediaries with unknown motives. They surrender control because they assume they lack competence. And something else to consider is that conversations around wealth are often obscured not because it must be, but because clarity produces independence. And independence is destabilizing to systems built on passive control. Now, most of you already sense this. I don't need to labor the point. But it is important to say plainly, I agree with you. Now let's not give in to outrage. Let's focus on correction. If you cannot understand the rules of the game, you cannot make decisions that serve you. Wealth is not about excess. It's about optionality. It is about margin. It is about the ability to act from stability and confidence rather than fear. That is why we must speak about it clearly. For you younger men, and even some of you older men struggling with finances, I cannot recommend enough the book called The Richest Man in Babylon. I'll leave a YouTube link in the video description so you can listen to it while you do chores. But just know, I am not recommending it because it contains advanced financial strategies. It does not. There are no complex instruments discussed. No market timing advice, no tax optimization techniques, and no economic commentary. That is precisely its strength. The story is deliberately placed in ancient Babylon, and that choice matters. By removing the reader from modern financial language and cultural taboos, the author eliminates distraction. There is no Wall Street vocabulary to hide behind. No contemporary political debates about capitalism or inflation. No technological noise. The setting strips wealth down to first principles. You are left with earning, spending, saving, lending, discipline, and character. In a modern setting, readers often become preoccupied with the mechanics of finance. Which brokerage to use? Which asset class performs better? Which economic system is corrupt? In the fictional ancient setting, those distractions disappear. What remains is your behavior, your habits, your discipline. The book is short and easy to read. It is written as a collection of parables and repeatable principles. It does not overwhelm. It does not attempt to impress. It aims to reorient. The core shift it encourages is not tactical, but psychological. A portion of what you earn belongs to you. That idea sounds obvious, but it is not. Most men operate as financial pass-through systems. Income arrives and is immediately allocated to lifestyle, obligations, upgrades, and impulses. Saving is treated as what remains after spending, rather than the priority that defines spending. The book helps reverse that orientation. It suggests that accumulation is not greed, but responsibility. That saving is not hoarding, but self-respect. That delayed gratification is not deprivation, but future sovereignty. I have observed in my own life that this shift, small at first, compounds more reliably than any speculative strategy. It does not create dramatic spikes, it creates stability. And stability changes the psychological posture of a man. When you possess stored resources, your decision-making changes. You are less reactive. You tolerate uncertainty better. You negotiate differently. You decline poor opportunities without fear. The book's simplicity is what makes it powerful. It does not give you complexity to hide behind. It confronts you with personal discipline. I like that. Everything we have discussed so far concerns the internal dimension of wealth, your posture, your habits, your relationship with what you earn. That is the foundation. Without internal discipline, external wealth becomes destabilizing. But discipline alone does not explain how our foundational ancestors understood wealth. There is a second dimension. If the first is internal, psychological, behavioral, and individual, the second is external, cultural, relational, visible. Internally, wealth governs the man. Externally, wealth signals his capacity to the tribe. We must examine both. When we examine the ancient world, wealth was inseparable from accomplishment. It was not simply possession, it was proof. Gold, land, tribute, and treasure were the visible residue of victory, alliance, risk, and leadership. Wealth was accumulated through action, and it was retained only through continued strength. Even Alexander, at the height of his campaigns, understood this principle. He did not simply conquer and hoard. He rewarded his generals, he paid his soldiers, he distributed treasure. He rewarded loyalty. This was not generosity in a sentimental sense, it was structural. Campaigns were not individual enterprises. They required discipline, competence, and shared risk. If Alexander had attempted to centralize all honor and all treasure to himself, his authority would have deteriorated quickly. A concept still used by the military that we will explore a little later. Wealth in that world functioned as accumulated honor made tangible. A king's treasury was not private indulgence. It was a visible ledger of campaigns won, territories secured, and alliances maintained. It was a signal to rivals and to followers alike. This leader has achieved. This leader can reward. This leader commands resources because he has proven capable of generating them. To lead meant to share in the accumulated honor and to distribute it appropriately. In Northern traditions, the concept of the ring giver reflects the same principle. A lord's greatness was measured not merely by what he possessed, but by what he bestowed upon those who stood with him. Wealth flowed through hierarchy. It reinforced loyalty. It validated accomplishment. It stabilized power. Hoarding without achievement was weakness. Hoarding without distribution creates instability. And our ancestors understood something we have forgotten. Wealth was a measure of capacity. It testified to what a man had done and to what he was capable of doing again. Culturally, this is where civilization encodes its values. What we reward reveals what we honor. What we honor shapes what men pursue. In the ancestral world, the path to wealth was clear and visible to all. It involved risk, leadership, competence, alliance, protection, and production. The story of acquisition mattered just as much as the bounty. A man's treasury could be traced to campaigns, trade, land stewardship, or service. In modernity, that connection is often obscured and in most cases lost altogether. We see only the net worth, the valuation, the headline number. We rarely examine the method of acquisition with the same seriousness. Consumer culture trains us to admire scale without interrogating substance. Materialism narrows our focus to possession, not origin. As a result, we sometimes elevate men based solely on accumulation, without asking whether their fortunes were built through contribution or extraction. How many men do we publicly deem successful, whose wealth was generated by predation upon the tribe, by addiction-based industries, by debt manipulation, by the deliberate erosion of communal stability, by selling weakness back to the very people they weaken? Now again, this is not a moral tantrum, it's a cultural diagnosis. When wealth is divorced from honor, a civilization begins rewarding cleverness over character, leverage over leadership, and influence over integrity. Eventually, young men no longer aim to build, they aim to exploit. They seek rent instead of building and creating, a distinction Aristotle understood well when he separated productive stewardship from the pursuit of money for its own sake. And when exploitation becomes aspirational, the tribe weakens. No, it rots from within. The issue is not wealth itself. The issue is whether wealth reflects capacity and contribution, or whether it reflects manipulation detached from responsibility and accountability. That distinction determines the health of a culture. It is necessary to say something plainly. Consumerism and materialism are not natural extensions of our older honor-based cultures. They are products of a modern economic order built around perpetual expansion, perpetual growth, and perpetual desire. They are not Western values. They have been imported, imposed, and enforced by people who care little about you and your culture. But we live in a world, not in an economy. An economy is a structure of incentives. It is designed, it is adjusted, it can be manipulated, it is managed. When growth becomes the highest virtue, consumption becomes moral good. When consumption becomes necessary for system stability, appetite is encouraged and restraint is quietly discouraged. This shift did not happen by accident. It emerged from modern philosophical commitments to material progress, to measurable output, to efficiency over formation and creation. Once those values dominate, culture reorganizes itself around them. In that environment, wealth becomes detached from honor, consumption, becomes identity. House, car, lifestyle displayed as proof of worth. Debt becomes normalized. Immediate gratification becomes virtue. But speculation about who engineered which policy is secondary to dealing with your problem in the moment. Let trusted historians sort that out. For now, you need to be financially healthy. What matters in the moment is clarity. You operate inside a system whose incentives do not automatically reward discipline, honor, or restraint. That does not make you a victim. It makes you and you alone responsible for the management of your way of life, and it won't be easy. If incentives encourage consumption, you must cultivate restraint. If incentives reward speculation, you must cultivate substance. If incentives normalize debt, you must cultivate margin. We must address the system as it exists, not as we wish it had been. Complaining about its origin will not stabilize your household. You live in the world, but you are not obligated to internalize its distortions. That distinction determines whether you are governed by appetite or by discipline. Before we close, I'd like to speak from my experience. I participate in the same financial hierarchy you do. I live in the same economic system. I earn, I spend, I save, I invest. I have built myself up, and more importantly, I have rebuilt myself up again. I am not outside of it, and I'm not pretending to be above it. But in my life, my relationship with wealth has been shaped, in part, by my time in the military. The military taught me something that most men are never explicitly taught. Not all incentives belong in the same arenas. In the military, compensation is structured, predictable. Rank determines pay. It is assumed. It is not negotiated per mission or per act of courage. That design is deliberate. When decisions are made, financial incentive is removed from the equation. The most honorable action is most likely not the highest paying action. Mission governs. That experience clarified something for me about wealth. Wealth is not merely accumulation, it is ordered capacity. There are different arenas in which that capacity must be managed separately. In your personal life, wealth means reserve, stability, the ability to protect your household from volatility. That is discipline. In business, wealth means productive risk, investment, value creation, growth that serves something real. In collective mission, whether military, civic, or fraternal, wealth means alignment. Resources exist to strengthen purpose, not to maximize extraction. Confuse those arenas and disorder follows. When profit governs brotherhood, it hollows it out. When mission logic governs your household finances, you neglect responsibility. When personal preservation governs enterprise, growth stalls. The problem is not wealth. The problem is misordered wealth. I learned that you can subordinate financial incentive in one arena without abandoning discipline in another. You can participate in mission without neglecting your household. You can build reserve personally without allowing profit to dominate everything you touch. That is compartmentalization. That is maturity. You cannot control macroeconomic architecture. You can control whether you build reserve. You can control whether you apply the right logic to the right arena. Start there. order your wealth correctly. You are accountable for your household. You are accountable for your reserve. You are accountable for the capacity you build. This is not ideology. This is alignment. Until next time.